Hey everybody. Love you too. I'm going to be speaking a lot about love right now. First of all, I need to say thank you. I think Eric posted yesterday that in moments of anxiety, you should give gratitude, so I'm giving a lot of gratitude right now. But I especially want to say thank you to Kevin and Donnie for having me. I also want to say it's Monday. I know a lot of restaurants aren't closed on Mondays. Ours is not. I want to say thank you to the team that's right now working so I could do this. And I want to say thank you to my wife, and who has, anytime I sign up for a project like this, has to work twice as hard to get everything else done in the world while I write a speech. So I love her, and I want to say thank you to her. So this October, I will reach a milestone. It's a dream I've held since I was a teenager. I'm publishing a book. But it's far from the great contemporary novel I dreamed of writing when I first came to the Midwest and found myself not as the voice of a generation, but as a cook calling back orders on a line. This career was a freak accident. I'd been rejected from a writing program I'd wanted to attend back east and found a second choice in downstate Illinois. I ended up here after a breakup, deeply lonely and afraid of the way the borderless prairie sky made me feel, like you might just float away without anybody noticing. But things turned around once I met my wife at a cafe here in the city. The cafe meant everything to me. It was full of beautiful people making beautiful, creative lives. Eventually, we took over, and I became a professional cook. I hadn't gone to culinary school. I had like 2 cooking gigs in my back pocket. I learned to cook not out of passion for a craft, but because back in grad school, I was dead broke, and I asked the guy sitting next to me at the bar, "So hey man, what do you do for money?" He got me a job that very night off Veterans Parkway in Normal, Illinois, at what I will charitably call an off-brand California pizza kitchen. So my wife and I, we never planned on being capital C chefs. We were lowercase cooks. We just wanted to welcome our community with food. At the time, our little cafe felt like a distant orbiting moon, outside the margins, so far from the cultural pull of downtown, we felt set free, untethered and unafraid. But being an outsider in an insider industry eventually became the biggest challenge of my career. I came to this work out of a desire to care for friends. Let's be real, it was basically a party. We cooked the way our grandparents had, with abundance and kindness and generosity. We actually cooked some of the very dishes our grandparents had made for us. But the capital C, which I had never sought out, eventually sought me out. And I admit, I drew it upon myself too in ever bolder shades. As soon as I was a chef, as soon as the party became a profession, with all the responsibilities and obligations of providing for a team, I began to struggle to find a way to care for myself. What irony for an industry that is literally in the business of selling care, that so many of us struggle to find that care ourselves. So today, we spent the day talking about hospitality in many ways, and Will mentioned it earlier, that in describing our work, it's common to separate the ideas of hospitality from service. Service being the technical getting of the thing that you want, the food, the glass of wine, the soup to eat your spoon with, while hospitality is the feeling you get when receiving that thing. The you in this exchange is always the guest. But today I want to ask about a different you. I want to ask about the you giving the hospitality. How does that you feel? How do I feel? Honestly, often like shit. I don't know if that was supposed to be funny or not, but it is. Honestly, often like shit. Too often. Oddly nervous, wound too tight. Many nights I wake at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, with the challenge of making sense of a life based on caring for others in public, while my inner life continues to generate the same dread and existential panic it did when I was 24. It's not really changed. Today, I'm telling you this story at a risk of sounding solipsistic or conceited, not just because it highlights a very common mental health challenge in the hospitality industry, but because it strives to understand the emotional labor of hospitality itself. It looks for answers in the transactions between people, in what we want from each other, in what we have to give. But first of all, I want to recognize that this kind of vulnerability that I'm showing now, is not something that everyone can afford. For some, vulnerability can be weaponized against them. But for me, I think of radical transparency as an act of responsibility, a duty for chefs in power to open themselves up to questions about the way value is articulated in their places of business and how they will act to make more caring, more kind, and more open spaces for all folks, no matter who. So I have a question. It's a question I've often asked my therapist. You can all tell me, is there any other job that receives daily performance reports first thing in the morning, like every single day? Sometimes 15 or 20 at a time, if I was Kevin or Donnie, sometimes hundreds or thousands at a time, with scores and rankings, emojis and hearts and frowns, 3 stars, 5 stars, 1 star. I don't know, she says. Maybe NFL quarterbacks? When I pick up my phone in the morning, every morning, and not just Monday mornings, I ask myself, so what's it gonna be today? Has Hammel lost his edge? Or did Louise S. write to say that she wept over a chestnut soup that quote unquote changed my life forever? Is Lula the, all caps, best hipster joint ever, man? Or was a recipe handed down to me by my wife's great-grandmother from Greece, which we have served at my restaurant 50 times a day, 6 days a week for the last 23 years, just kind of a bad idea? It's so funny. These streams of feedback, all real life, come through my inbox like the Groundhog Day version of the gates of judgment. Most of the advice I receive is to shut these voices out and to recognize that what chefs do is inherently subjective, public, and therefore open to critique. But what I want to talk about today is the harm these voices are doing to my own capacity for care, both the good voices and the bad. As a chef who started before the social media age, I can attest that these voices have far more power in the replication machine of the internet as they multiply as food media, Instagram comments, award shows, and so on. And I admit to being tossed around by them like a leaf in the wind. Because the subjective opinion of others, of outsiders, it does matter in a restaurant. Sometimes praise brings heights of confidence, even bravery, while an insult can detain me in a pit of anxiety, loathing, and fear. The fear of losing my business, of not being able to support the team or my family, a fear that was realized in the pandemic. Now that we're back, these fears might actually be worse, because it happened once, it could happen again. Now imagine this kind of pressure not just on this leader's well-resourced shoulders, but transferred to the backs of servers, assistants, bartenders, hosts, bussers, managers, all of whom must address questions of value and self-worth every day as they search for approval, connections, praise, and tips from strangers. And ask yourself, where is the care in this relationship? Where is the trust? And what is exchanged when people take care of each other for money? It's often said that one of the first steps a leader can take in building a healthy workplace culture in a restaurant is to center hospitality for the staff first and foremost. The thinking is that if you extend this grace to your staff, they will extend it out naturally to the public. But there's nothing natural about these relationships. Not everyone has the same capacity for care. It is not a well from which we can pull endless supplies of magic care water. Our capacity for care, it might change on a day, a shift, a whim, and it certainly changes person to person on a team. The commitments and trust that a team hold for each other in a restaurant are different than the transactional and transitory trust of a server-guest relationship. But what we need to make both sets of these relationships thrive is an understanding of the conditions between us and a willingness to navigate those conditions with values leading the way. So we've all heard the maxim, you can't take care of someone if you're not taking care of yourself. It's the rule of airlines, put your mask on first before helping others, and of the wellness industry too, just ask Gwyneth Paltrow. When I describe the difficulties I've had taking care of myself, I am often met with skepticism. Like, how can you actually think you suck at your job? Lula is more than 2 decades old. 23 years is like 75 human years in a restaurant. Just open your eyes. But tell me anything different at 3 a.m. when, unfortunately, my eyes literally will not close, and I will tell you that you lie. My therapist, God bless her, she comes to me with a plan. For years, she's been insisting that to learn to care for myself, I must first make a commitment to love. Love like me. And now, I know that sounds incredibly hokey and gross, she says, but come on, just give it a shot. So she prescribes what's called the loving kindness meditation, and I Google it. But before you all start groaning and squirming uncomfortably in your seats, I promise this isn't about me and my therapist, it's about hospitality. In this meditation, we aren't searching for romantic or sexual love. The love is closer to the Greek notion of philia, or brotherly love, which was understood as a mutual exchange of care and respect, a meeting of needs, a wanting for someone that one thinks good. And I'm going to say that this is the kind of love that also happens between people in hospitality. The practice of this meditation, if you're not aware, is to repeat a few affirming lines, such as, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be free of pain. It's as a kind of mantra. But the compelling and proactive mode of this meditation is that you say these lines for someone. You start with someone for whom you have deep and lasting affection, someone close to you, a spouse, a brother, a friend. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be free of pain. And then you move to someone you just don't like not necessarily an outright enemy, don't imagine an evil world leader, but rather a competitor, a nemesis, that person at work whose very voice sparks a fight or flight response. And for them, you wish the same. You next extend this grace to all living creatures. Wish all the dogs and cats your best, all the trees, all the tomatoes ripening on the vine the world over. Wanting good for someone, anyone, strangers and friends alike. This is the kind of love that passes between people when they care for each other. It's a conditional exchange between folks who need something. It's a trade. But then here comes my brick wall. Suddenly I crash into the last step of the meditation, which, you guessed it, is to extend such loving kindness to myself. And I beg you to imagine me sitting there saying out loud, I want you, Jason Hammel, to be happy, healthy, free of pain. The words collapse. They sound false, insincere, offensively so, and it's embarrassing. I feel like that character from the SNL skit in the 90s who looks at himself in the mirror and say, God dang it, people like me, don't they? They love me. So for years, I could not find any kind of satisfaction in these words, despite the joy of me saying them for others. It wasn't until I realized that the conditions I was applying to this love, namely acceptance, weren't being met on the other side. There was no judicial body that could bestow approval in return. There was no one else in this relationship but me. I realized that self-love was the only unconditional love I'd ever experienced, and if I were able to express it, I would have to take a leap of faith. Look at how closely the work of this meditation mirrors the work we do in a restaurant. We take care of strangers, we feed friends, we welcome people we don't really like, and loved ones too. And we begin with a desire to do good by them. Why? Because we need something good in return. This isn't a bad thing, to need, to want. It's a human thing. And for each of these relationships, the conditions change. They're unique, bartered, negotiated. What I realized is that I needed to be clear about the conditions, about what was expected. When it came to myself, I had to understand that the acceptance I expected was simply unreciprocated. I just needed to love for love's sake, to care because to care is better than to harm. I'm not sure I would have come to this place if I hadn't read the book All About Love, which is by the philosopher Bell Hooks. This, in my opinion, should be required reading for all restaurant employees. I'm going to quote her just briefly. She writes, "It is very difficult and rare for us to be able to extend unconditional love to others, largely because we cannot exercise control over the behavior of someone else." That sounds like a restaurant to me. We can, however, exercise control over our own actions. We can give ourselves the unconditional love that is the grounding for sustained acceptance and affirmation. When we give this precious gift to ourselves, we are able to reach out to others from a place of fulfillment and not from a place of lack. A place of lack. How many of us have profound recollections of a place of lack? A first moment when you felt unloved, forgotten, suddenly not at the center of the world, when you felt out of someone's care. Left behind at a train station, fired from a job, in the back of a classroom, suddenly realizing you can't read the writing on the board, on a street corner in the city when you were 24, when the hand lets go and you see her receding in the light across the street into the shadows of the day. Like me, you may search back behind these memories, back to a first place before this loss hurt you. And I'm going to guess that for many of us here, it was at a grandmother's table, someone who gave you the love and care you deserved. This is the case for me, my grandmother's table with the plastic tablecloth and the pasta with the clams. At no other time in my life did I feel a greater sense of sustained acceptance and affirmation. That is, until my wife and I opened up our cafe. This is why I became a cook, to create a space in my community of sustained acceptance and affirmation, which you might as well call joy. Now, as a capital C chef, I'll need to recreate that joy inside myself first, and I'm just figuring this out now, like 23 years in. This is what it means to lead by example, to get your hands dirty. If I can't do a job, no one else should have to do it. If I want my team to do the work of hospitality, I'll have to do it first, starting with me, to show what it looks like when an imperfect, often confused, sometimes struggling man is compelled, despite his doubts, to reach out from a place of fulfillment, which, in the end, is all we really want a restaurant to be. So, let us center love as practice, not as a gift, but as a duty, as an ethic, as labor. Let us be honest and clear about what is exchanged, about what we work for, about what we are willing and able to give. Let us recognize the importance of loving ourselves unconditionally in order to love others with conditions, conditions that are fair and just and kind, because to care is better than to harm, and because, frankly, it is the duty of people in power to care, to make a space of sustained affirmation and acceptance, a place of fulfillment and joy. So today, I wish all of you health, happiness, and freedom from pain. Thanks.